Jennifer Eberhardt, I'm proud to say, is also one of Harvard's own. After completing her PhD in psychology here in 1993, she went to Yale, for which we forgive her, and assumed a joint faculty. She forgives herself, too. She assumed a joint faculty position in psychology and African American studies. She was also a research fellow at Yale's Institute for Race, Inequality, and Politics. Since moving to Stanford in 1998, she has conducted research in areas ranging from social neuroscience to the intersection of psychology and the law. Her scholarship explores the connection between our minds and our worlds. In her most recent work, she examines how social representations of race can affect visual perception and neural processing. She is currently a research fellow at the Center for Comparative Study of Race and Ethnicity, and she co-directs the Mind, Culture, and Society specialization track for advanced undergraduates. I am honored to introduce Jennifer Eberhardt.
Thank you for that introduction, and thank you all for inviting me. I had too much time on my hands this morning, so I decided to clean off my computer desktop, and I actually erased my talk. But, but I was able to get it together, I think, again, so hopefully we'll just see how this goes. So first let me present two dominant views on race and talk about where my work is situated. One view on race is that race is absent. For a long time now, we've known that most white Americans think about racial discrimination as a thing of the past. So most believe that discrimination against blacks is no longer a problem. Most believe that blacks have equal employment, education, and housing opportunities. Most think that blacks are treated fairly. And most Americans generally claim that they never experience negative thoughts or emotions when they encounter people from different races. Now, according to the General Social Survey, only 17% of white Americans report being very concerned about racial issues. Only 7% consider race one of the nation's most important issues, and only 6% say that they think about race very often. From laboratory studies on college campuses, we know that white students don't consider race to be central or important at all to their personal identities. And the average white student claims very few friends across race lines. Now, based on these data, one could come away with the impression that race matters for very few white Americans, and for those for whom it does matter, it occupies them for a very limited number of circumstances or for a very limited amount of time. Okay, so not only are white Americans inclined to think that they're racially unbiased, but they report that they're not inclined to think about race at all. Now, my work is consistent with lots of other work in social psychology on racial bias, and it stands in stark contrast to this lay view on race. And the basic ideas are that race can influence people more often than they think, that our attitudes and our beliefs about race can be processed implicitly. So in circumstances where we don't even know we're thinking about race, we could be thinking about race. And at times, these attitudes and beliefs about race can lead to negative consequences. Now, for the purpose of today's talk, I'm going to focus on the racial associations that involve African Americans. And the studies in part 2 all examine the association of blacks with crime, and the studies in part 2 examine the association of blacks with animals. And the argument here is that blacks are not only criminalized, but they're also dehumanized in ways that could lead to negative consequences in the criminal justice context. Okay, so first let's talk about the association of blacks with crime. Now, of course, there are dozens of things that keep this association strong, but I'm going to quickly highlight 3. And the first is that the stereotype of blacks as hostile or dangerous or criminal is one of the strongest stereotypes of blacks in American society. It shows up in study after study. And although not everyone actively endorses this stereotype, nearly everyone in our society has knowledge of its existence. Second, law enforcement practices underscore the relationship between race and crime. This is a cartoon that I borrowed from the New Yorker, and it shows these two cops. They're stopping this black guy. They hold up the sketch, and they say, "You look like this sketch of someone who's thinking about committing a crime." Now, this takes the use of race as a proxy for criminality to the point of absurdity, because that's what cartoons do. But using race as a proxy for criminality is routinely practiced in law enforcement communities, and it's perfectly legal as long as it's not the sole factor used. Third, actual crime statistics contribute to an association of race and crime. So this graph shows that black males are grossly overrepresented in prisons and in jails relative to their numbers in the population. Okay? And racial disparities like these have not escaped the popular press. We hear these disparities reported over and over in news reports across the nation. Okay? So we have beliefs, we have practices, and we have this intense racial stratification all working together to support and strengthen this association between race and crime. And I'm going to argue that this black crime association is so strong that it influences us in indirect and in unexpected ways, despite our desire to be egalitarian. Now, all of the studies I'll present are relevant to the criminal justice context, and I'm going to highlight their relevance as I move along. Many officer-involved shootings involve the detection of a weapon. So for the first study, my colleagues and I asked the question, can simple exposure to black faces lead people to see weapons better? Okay, so to examine this, we invited male undergraduates, white male undergraduates, in to participate in a study, and they were seated in front of a computer screen with a focus dot at the center, and they're just asked to stare at that focus dot, and then there are flashes of light that appear around that focus dot, and they're to tell us for each flash really quickly whether that flash appeared on the left or the right of the computer screen, and they do that just with a button push. Okay? Although the participants were seeing these flashes of light, some of the flashes were actually the faces of young men that were being flashed on the screen at such a rapid rate that they couldn't consciously detect them. Okay? So here it is in slow motion. So some of the participants were exposed to an entire series of white male faces in this way, some were exposed to black male faces, and then some to no faces at all. Okay?